This short lecture will provide a summary of key points in Karen Seccombe's Chapter 6 in the So You Think I Drive a Cadillac book. This chapter refers to the ways that individuals who are on public assistance manage to get by. As Karen Seccombe has clearly established in prior chapters, the amount of assistance provided to individuals through cash assistance and food stamps and housing assistance tend to not be sufficient to be able to raise children and support a family. And so this chapter really kind of explores how it is that women manage to do that if indeed there isn't enough money, if funding is insufficient. And she interviews her clients and comes up with a list of a few different ways that individuals manage to do this. She says that it is a well-guarded secret that women who receive welfare must find additional sources of assistance to take care of their families, that this secret is kept from caseworkers but well known to other recipients who receive benefits, and it's the source of deep suspicion for the taxpayer. This is the part of the welfare fraud, I guess, is partly what we're concerned about in here, although there are many other areas that aren't necessarily fraudulent, and most of what she talks about does not really focus upon fraud. Why is it a secret? It isn't that caseworkers are blind to this, but efforts are made really to at times to conceal sources of income, because in some ways, dollar for dollar, any sort of outside help that an individual gets could reduce the individual's grant for benefits by the same amount. So that if somebody gives you $50 a month because they see that you're struggling to make ends meet, if the caseworker becomes aware of that, then the caseworker has to reduce the individual's grant by $50, which really starts it out, puts them back right where they started from again. So the way this is arranged, it becomes necessary for the individual to hide sources of income from caseworkers. Lucky women, and women are lucky if they do have this, family and friends that are able and willing to help, and even those individuals who can help oftentimes cannot provide consistent help, but from time to time they can provide help in many different ways, not only financial but in terms of in-kind services, as we'll see. Women have to have the skill to seek out needed services in the social welfare system itself. There isn't one kind of system that enables women to find their way through the welfare system to get the services that they need, and so they really have to know where to go sometimes to get help, that additional help that might be necessary. And as we've mentioned, they find it necessary sometimes to use deception to either finesse or manipulate the system in a way that they can get the resources they need to provide for their kids. They have to really patchwork all of these together to establish a survival strategy for themselves and their children. How do women who receive welfare make ends meet? There are means of obtaining supplemental help separated into three categories in this chapter: informal support, formal support, and working side jobs. Informal support really involves three different groups that, at least in Seccombe's approach here, she looks at first assistance from families, and she makes a note that the extended family system really is something that is much more prominent among many of the minority populations in our culture, not so much in the majority. The Northern European Caucasian majority has a much less of a focus upon the extended family system. In the last 100 years or so, as we've become increasingly industrialized, actually I guess it's been the last 200 years now, but we have really moved away from an extended family system to a nuclear family system, and the idea of leaning on your brothers and sisters, your aunts and uncles, your grandparents, those kinds of things, as a regular source of support and a means of help is seen as somehow dysfunctional now. But in many minority populations, the extended family system is really a method of survival, and we see this through grandparents raising children in many minority cultures and that type of thing, as almost as a matter of routine. And Karen Seccombe wrote about that in an earlier chapter, I believe, as well. And and the dominant minority, the ideology is that there's dysfunction evident in that, but in fact, it's probably extremely functional for particularly for the populations that are struggling to get by. And so individuals receiving public assistance will turn to family members sometimes for things such as, well, maybe borrowing money, but more likely, having somebody sit in and babysit kids while they go do an activity they have to do or they go to work, getting rides, providing a place to do laundry and things like that, maybe occasional gifts, emotional support, these kinds of things. These kinds of services largely are not cash assistance, and so it isn't necessarily something that's going to impact the grant. It's what we call goods and services, or other people refer to it as in-kind services, where somebody just does something for another person. And this is a very valuable source of support and can save a welfare recipient a great deal of money as far as child care, transportation costs, laundromat expenses, those kinds of things. Another type of assistance sometimes is from friends and neighbors, and there is some reluctance, as Seccombe points out, sometimes to turn to people that you're not related to, although some communities have a good mutual support network established, but by and large individuals don't do that and sometimes really don't want to lean on their neighbors. But boyfriends, for instance, may be one source of outside support. That maybe there's some emotional support, occasional cash assistance, gifts, those kinds of things. Seccombe addresses the issue about, Seccombe addresses the belief that welfare mothers have freeloading boyfriends living off the money, and that's where a lot of the money goes. And she really explodes that myth more or less and says that there's sort of a no pay, no stay kind of a policy here, where if anything, if boyfriends are living in the home, they're expected to make some contributions. And in some respects, Seccombe says that women on welfare have this sort of a relationship with those men that more or less trade sex for the kinds of things that they can provide for their children. Assistance from the children's fathers is another area, and the Family Support Act in 1988 actually required the mothers to identify the father to receive TANF monies. Many fathers are very, very poor themselves and really aren't a reliable source of income. Some are in jail in the minority populations, and much more so than would be in the mainstream population percentage-wise. Some have died, some have just disappeared, and so the fathers are not really usually a good source of support, a reliable source of support at least. If they do provide support, it's pretty sporadic and unpredictable. Systems of formal support include charities and social services in the community, the food bank, discount clothing stores, those kinds of things, so that charities that provide food, clothing, childcare, emergency utility assistance, Christmas gifts at the holidays, those kinds of things can be very, very important to mothers in trying to provide a quality of life for their children. About a third of single mother households are what are known as food insecure, and another 22% in addition to that have very low food security. So that means about half of the households led by single mothers have some form of food insecurity to one extent or another. And so places like the food bank, for instance, can be very vital to individuals on receiving public assistance. And it's very difficult sometimes for mothers to find it difficult to find where services are available. Working side jobs is one of the areas that I think there's of concern to the taxpayer. As the individual should be working, but then when they go to work, there's a penalty for going to work. Now, we have talked about and studied about the fact that as over the years of the AFTC program, there was an effort made to provide what was called an earned income disregard, where a certain percentage of an individual's earned income would not be counted against their AFDC grant. So this was to encourage the person to go to work. But once that person had established a certain income level, that she was no longer entitled to receive public assistance, then the grant would end, even with that earned income disregard. And perhaps more important than the cash assistance that's lost is for instance, the medical care and other benefits. The ASHA housing in Alaska, it's the Alaska State Housing Assistance, but housing assistance, wherever it is, as income goes up, that goes up. As if you have some sort of a sliding scale for any kind of services, say mental health services, as income goes up, those fees go up. Food stamp, if your income goes up, you lose food stamp benefits. And perhaps most important of all, as Seccombe pointed out in a chapter or two earlier, with the loss of medical benefits, that is perhaps the biggest loss as individuals come off of welfare. And in most of the jobs that these individuals are getting, they don't have benefits. They're not the kind of jobs that most of us aspire to have, where you have a full health insurance plan for yourself and your children. And so working side jobs sometimes is a better alternative for these moms, and they will make ends meet by doing this, and oftentimes not reporting their earnings to the caseworkers because it hurts them when they do. And about a quarter of the mothers in the author's study reported recent work that was not reported to the caseworker. While they're legally required to report, and some of them do report those things, make no mistake, they could lose income as a result. And particularly in a lot of these side jobs, with work being very unpredictable, sporadic, maybe just occasional kinds of things where you can help somebody out. It may take a month or so if the income is reported before your grant is reduced, but then if you lose that income, understand it's going to take a month or two before the income is taken back out of the grant, and the amount of public assistance adjusts back to the proper level. And so there's a month or two there where there's insufficient funds to get by. Mothers learn this very quickly in the system, and so there is a disincentive to reporting side jobs and things like that for this very reason. Again, you have to think about, this is not a woman who is kind of sitting around the house eating her bonbons and scheming to find new ways to get more and more money out of the federal government or out of the state government or out of your pocket. These are largely mothers who are trying to patchwork a system that they can provide for their children reliably. It's a very different kind of picture here, and this is the key to understanding what Seccombe is trying to say here. That yes, there are women who are committing some fraud in not reporting income and other sources of income, cash assistance, but they're doing so because they're trying to make ends meet, not because they're trying to cheat anybody. Living month to month, she says, these mothers resort to a variety of legal and illegal tactics to support their children. They live a tenuous existence between hope and despair. So that concludes Karen Seccombe's chapter on living on welfare. And in the next few chapters that are left in the book, we're going to explore a little bit more about some of the factors that are involved in a day-to-day living on public assistance.